But I'll tell you, like, my friend Jason Wild, JW Asset Management is the chairman of Terra, said, he had a quip on Twitter, which I thought was quite apt. He said, listen, they're going to pay us now or they're going to pay us later. So if we get that blue sweep, you're going to see them price that in the near term, and then potentially you'll see these combinations, the M&A and all that stuff come through. Or if you have a couple more years to build that moat, it's just going to create that, it's just going to increase that market value when the big boys come to pay and play.
Hey everybody, regular Howard guest at this point, Todd Harrison, Phil Perlman's brother. They're just not related and no one gets the joke, but it's just, I have to humor myself, Todd. Welcome to Investing for Profit and Joy,
Thank you.
Cannabis edition. And we have Todd Harrison, who is a regular and a friend of mine, who's the only person I go to on the subject, through his network, on the subject of cannabis, because I'm not a cannabis person. Although, full disclosure, I'm an LP in your fund, and I own MSOS at the moment, and I have a private investment company called Cadenwood, started by Todd Davis, and that is in the CBD business. It's a fast-growing company in the retail and consumer product side. So it's called the level 1, 2, and 3 products for sleep, etc. Anyways, we are here to talk what a week. So the elections have happened. The stuff that you had talked about on my episodes before was what could happen in a blue sweep. We don't know if we're going to get a blue sweep. I don't know what I want at this point. I just want yelling to stop. But tell us a little bit about the week and how it played out according to what you might have thought and what might be ahead in the cannabis sector.
Sure. So, I think we talked last time about how a lot of fast money was playing the election and the smart money was focused on the fundamentals. And sure enough, that's what we're looking at is the fundamentals on the U.S. side. And, in terms of election night, it was a pretty clear and decisive winner on election night, and that was cannabis. Or really drugs, the war on drugs was the big loser.
It really was. It really surprised me.
It's enough is enough. Well, it's a combination of a number of things, but as we've talked about, prohibition is very much the exception rather than the rule. This was something that was weaponized by the U.S. government to stop Mexican immigration at the Texas-El Paso border. The time is up, right? For a lot of reasons, but, from an investing standpoint, you're talking about a $300 billion plus global market moving into a taxable realm. And, the bumps and bruises that come along the way there, but certainly I think the sweep across the 5 states, as we talked about, on Twitter, it
was New Jersey,
it was Arizona, it was Montana, and South Dakota, both on recreational, and then South Dakota also on medical, and then Mississippi on medical. Mississippi really, I think, is the eye-opener out of that conversation. They're not exactly progressive down in...
it's as red as you can get.
Crooked letter I. Yeah. But no, I think that's the story. I think the American people have spoken. It took some time for the ballots to be counted on some of the other races. And as you alluded to, the Senate's not going to be decided until January. We can discuss sort of the pros and cons there, but I think the real story here is the fundamentals. There's a really nifty chart that we've been throwing on Twitter. It shows North American MSOs. The valuation is in the bottom third of all industries, and the growth rate is the highest of any industry. So you're talking about a mispriced industry, right? I was going to say mispriced piece of merchandise, but the truth of the matter is, every company has company-specific risk, but if you look on the aggregate, U.S. cannabis has a lot going for it just based on what we saw coming out of the states and the increase in the total addressable market.
And so you talk about the 5 states, but who was the big loser on? What states were the big loser? What states are the furthest behind in getting it? Or did they win everywhere it was on the ballot?
It was a clean sweep. That's my point. And it wasn't just that all 5 states swept. And in the case of South Dakota, both recreational and medical, it's the manner in which they swept. It was mercy-esque. There was a mercy rule. If there was a mercy rule, cannabis would have...
This episode is presented by Masterworks. My wife Ellen and I are longtime contemporary art fans, having collected contemporary art for 20 years now. So I was thrilled to have Scott Lynn, the founder of Masterworks, on the podcast to explain the fascinating art world and how exactly this industry operates. The art market allows us to think about diversification and fractional ownership in such a unique way. This is an amazing industry that remains uncorrelated to other investing classes. Every investor will enjoy listening to this episode, I promise. Head over to howardlindzon.com/masterworks to give it a listen. The link is also in the description of the video.
It was mercy-esque. There was a mercy rule. If there was a mercy rule, cannabis would have won. They would have called it. This is long overdue. I mean, and it's not just about the money, the tax revenue, or the jobs, or the medicine. It's about social justice. It's about, the will of the people. And at this point, it's probably the last bipartisan issue out there.
And so MSOS, multi-state operator, we talked about it in my last, I'll share that. And so that had like a 20% week just on it. So does that, so what new things can we expect product-wise for investors? Or is it just more of the same, catching up with the value, catching up with the catalyst, which is I don't think it was ever being priced as a value thing. I think it was a fear. It was a regulation fear more than a value thing. So is this just more of the same that'll follow, playing catch up, or?
No, there's a few things. Now, 30 years I've been doing this. And you made the reference to Phil Perlman. I could see the hairline. I could see why you think we're brothers, because Phil and I share a hairline. But 30 years now I've been in this game, and I've come to realize that there's 4 primary metrics that help shape an investment. And akin to almost legs under the table, the more legs you have of those 4 metrics, the more stable of the table, the better the odds of success. And those 4 metrics are fundamentals, technicals, structural, and psychology. We can look at the fundamentals we just talked about, highest growth rate, bottom third valuation wise. They start reporting this week, Wednesday, Green Thumb and a few others. They're going to be really just tremendous earnings. Cresco, all Curaleaf, Trulieve, TerraSend, you can go on and on, Columbia Care. These are all companies we have positions in, but for a reason. We think US over Canada for the reasons we're talking about. Not saying Canada won't rally, but the fundamentals on the US side are just compelling. So technically, not just that all these stocks are making 52-week highs, they're making it on massive volume. And I think that's something, as somebody who's been watching this space for a long time, it's music to our ears, because these have been ghost towns for a long time. And it's still relatively bifurcated, that you're seeing the volume really toward the haves that we talked about. There's like a handful, 4 or 5, maybe 6 companies that are already cash flow positive, already made the investments to scale into the back half of this year, first half of next year. But those fundamentals, those technicals, and then you talk about the structural metric, and that's really the regulatory arbitrages, whether that's safe banking and the access to capital and capital markets, or the institutional migration. Really, the barbarians at the gate, the Putnams, the Wellingtons, the BlackRocks of the world getting into this space. Structural, that's what we mean. The structural underpinnings are shifting. And then psychology, we've talked about that. I think, it was demonstrated on election night, but we've already seen since election night, and we're taping this, 5 days thereafter, the governors of New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, they're already, posturing for 2021 and the Eastern Seaboard toppling. And that's the story from in terms of psychology as that shifts through.
When can the next vote happen? When can the next states put it on the ballot, or is it 4 more years? Or
no, it's different. Every state is different. Is the real answer? Not just for how this is going to come on board, but once it's on board, how it's going to be regulated and how it's going to be taxed, and that's that's the way we want to keep it right now, right? We want to keep this as a state regulated domain. And that's we'll talk a little bit about the optionality there with the January runoffs. But New York is already talking about putting it into their budget, as of, I think that vote is in April. So that's what we're looking at for New York. Pennsylvania, you need to get that the governor and the lieutenant governor, John Fetterman, have been very vocal about this, but they have to go through the legislative process there. But that's going to take some time to work through. So it's not clear exactly when, but the direction is undeniable. This is going to pass. Ned Lamont for the Connecticut governor has already said he doesn't want people driving to get weed in New Jersey or neighboring states. So it's, the writing's on the wall, and then you start moving down the eastern seaboard, Virginia, Maryland, and so on, all the way to Florida. I think you're going to see this, by next couple of years, it's going to look a lot different, and it's going to continue to expand.
So in the runoff, what's the ups and what's the big up and the big negative that people don't see in the runoff?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a delicate question. And it's not exactly probably the most politically correct answer, but a lot of the industry executives that I speak with are actually preferring a divided government, insofar that it would allow the existing multi-state operators time to build their moat. It'll stave off competition from other big box retailers and the Canadian players, perhaps. As much as we would talk about the blue wave being the best case, I think from a price action standpoint, it most certainly would be the best case. It would introduce the potential for that legislative agenda really to swing to the left. And the consensus of some of the people I speak with is that the MORE Act, for instance, which would deschedule and decriminalize, decriminalization without a legal framework is just going to push the black market or the illicit market forward. And then you have the issue with the FDA. If this is descheduled and the FDA tries to come in, a lot of industry insiders remember what happened with CBD and the FDA and how they really just fucked up that entire industry. So those are the concerns. But I'll tell you, my friend Jason Wild, JW Asset Management, is the chairman of Terra, said, he had a quip on Twitter, which I thought was quite apt. He said, listen, they're going to pay us now or they're going to pay us later. So if we get that blue sweep, you're going to see them price that in the near term, and then potentially you'll see these combinations, the M&A and all that stuff come through. Or if you have a couple more years to build that moat, it's just going to create that, it's just going to increase that market value when the big boys come to pay and play, because it's a buy build. Right. This isn't something that you can just say, hey, I'm going to go get into the cannabis business. There are SOPs and all sorts of logistics that you need to know, and they're going to have to pay to enter that space.
Yeah. So the early movers that I'm starting to see really did the work and stayed out of trouble and kept their state in business, really was just to stay alive. I really finally have an advantage for all the headaches.
Yeah, as it should be. I mean, it was what, a 92% decline in the global cannabis index from January 2018 to March 2020. I mean, if you made it through, you have the scar tissue to show for it. I know I have a lot more scar tissue and a lot less hair. It's been a bumpy ride.
So will the Pfizers and the Mercks and whatever come into this business, or everybody answers to money. So is there a point where the drug companies get in this business, or is it too small or too much risk for the drug?
No, I don't think it's too small. I think it's a question of opening up the research and opening up the trials. What we're going to see going forward now that we've firmly entered 2.0, like 1.0 again is Canadian cultivation that had its boom and bust, and it's got a lot of capacity up north that they're still trying to work through. Not to say there's not some good companies up there, but that's very much a 1.0 play with the exception of a handful of players. 2.0 is the notion of cannabis as an ingredient in CPG and end products use cases across the board. And I think that's going to continue to unfold here as this institutional migration continues. But what we're going to get to is a point where the 3.0 or efficacy-driven solutions, biotech, medicine. This is really focused on indications that are of currently unmet medical conditions or new novel approaches to these conditions. And you're going to see this bifurcation again in the space from 2.0 to 3.0, which is going to be that FDA-approved pathway. And as you start to see more and more of these drugs, these cannabinoid-based wellness solutions solve for medical riddles, I think that's going to really give a nice halo effect to the entire 2.0 curve. All those late adopters that are convinced that this is a gateway drug, that this is going to fry your brain, when they realize that this is more likely to solve for cancer than cause it, I think that's going to really help that consumer curve, the entire consumer curve move up.
Yeah, no one speeds on weed. The only danger is slowing down and opening your door to see where the curve is. The curve is. That's the danger. So finally, part of this is not to yell out ideas. My goal here is to point out the people that help people speed along. So for people that want to follow on, it's Todd Harrison on Twitter. It's very simple. You also have, you're writing a lot. Just how do people follow along if they don't want to use Twitter?
We have a lot of content at www.cb1cap.com. That's www.cb1cap.com. We'll throw it up.
I mean, everybody's different. Some people need email. Some people just,
no, but we have, we've been writing, I've been doing this for a long time, Howard, as you know. I've always said the market writes the script and we'll tell the story, and the story's been being told every day in real time. So we'll, every month I'll write a longer form column that tries to lay out the landscape and look ahead, and that's at CB1Cap.com. And it's syndicated elsewhere. And, I'm at Todd at CB1Cap.com. I like to talk to people about this. I think that the world is offsides, or I should say the regulations are offsides. The world has never really left the right side. And, you talk about, even like the simplest things, like the difference between medical and recreational. Like, I think it's semantics by and large. I think people have been self-medicating for the last 90 years because they were told that this is, this is drugs, this is bad, when it really, I think it's medicine. So there's a lot left to learn. There's certainly a lot of risks, and certainly there's going to be a lot of regulations that are going to come down the pipe. It's going to be bumpy, but nothing worth having is ever easy. And if the last couple of years are an indication, I think, this space is about to turn quite positive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for most drugs, it seems like, as I've gotten older, just because chemically, if it works.
Your body requires it. You need some help as you get older. That's the thing about cannabis. The largest growing demo is the older population, 55 to 65. I mean, as you get older, the tone of your endocannabinoid system changes. Your body produces endocannabinoids already. So the cannabinoids found in cannabis are really supplementing your body's natural processes in terms of regulating neurotransmissions. It's a lot if you don't understand it, and nobody really is following the science yet. But I think as we move along this curve, and as it becomes a little bit more acceptable to research this and accessible to research this, I think it's going to solve for a tremendous amount of medical riddles, and that's the exciting part.
The self-medication part is the scary part, right? Like, people shouldn't be self-medicating, and they've been forced to.
I mean, if you take aspirin every day, it's probably not good for you. If you take, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's about moderation. I mean, yes, are there risks? Of course. Should you smoke a joint and go, drive a car around? No, you shouldn't do that. But like, common sense, this is, you can't look me in the eye and tell me that you can go out and get cigarettes or alcohol or opioids. But cannabis is where you draw the line. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's what I'm for, just common sense. And people, we can use the internet and yell at CEOs and the president, but we can't decide what we're going to smoke. So,
it's not just about smoking, Howard. Again, like, I think I had this conversation last night with a friend of mine. Like, most people, when they think of cannabis, they think of somebody lighting a joint. My whole point here is 2.0 is an ingredient. It's going to be in your drinks and your food and your bubble baths and your lotions. I mean, there's going to be a lot of use cases, and a lot of the cannabinoids are going to be non-euphoric. It's not even about getting you high. It's about offering a therapeutic use case. So that's the education that we're talking about. And if society wakes up to that side of the story, I think it's going to be accretive to the whole understanding.
And then who's doing other good work on the media and research side? Like, for a beginner that wants to start out, they can't afford to be in a hedge fund. MSOS is kind of a complicated ETF in a sense, because you're not directly owned. A lot of these companies are pink sheet. So where does like a non-accredited beginner investor learn about this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think MSOS or MSOs, as they like to call it, which we advise on in full disclosure, I don't think that's all that complicated. It's really the only New York Stock Exchange listed ETF that has exposure to US cannabis. So you don't really need to know how the sausage is made. You just need to know that it tastes good and that the price of sausage is going up, and that's some sausage.
Sure.
But there's some good people. Listen, Alan Bronstein, I think does good work. Their marijuana moment. They do. So this is all free stuff. Again, if anybody is interested in learning more,
just hit you up.
Hit me up, and I'll try to help people find their way. I mean, it's an exciting time, Howard. I know you're a tech guy. But I look at sort of the world of tech, and I'm not saying it can't go up anymore, but I think that, the majority of gains for the majority of people. It's going to be a tougher slog to get those types of returns over the next 5 years. Whereas, cannabis, you're talking about this is a frontier market that's now moving into the mainstream, and it has all of those arbitrages still ahead of it. It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Well, it's exciting. I mean, listen, the idea is, and technology will be applied to this industry, whether it's around research, distribution, and retail, and how people can get it. So obviously, the technology is going to apply here. So it's kind of exciting. And like you said, it's not about smoking it anymore. It's about your bubble bath, or it's not for everybody. Smoking was a limiting thing, and
cardiovascularly, there's nobody that's going to sit here and tell you that smoking anything is good for your lungs, but like I've done a lot of research. I've actually seen studies that suggest that people with lung cancer should be inhaling, vaporizing cannabis so the cannabinoids can get straight to your lungs. I mean, there's a lot. My point is, suspend your preconceived notions that this is a gateway drug, this is your brain on drugs, and look at this with an open mind, because I think that, in a couple of years from now, what's going to be obvious is that this is really a friend, not a foe. And not just for the body, but for your investment portfolio, if you know how to look at the space.
Well, congrats. Hasn't been an easy little couple of years. And, I think the lesson is that if you do your work and you understand, like you said, what the cornerstones of how things move up. You got to understand the fundamentals, the technicals. There has to be some structural issues. You need a catalyst. Obviously, it helps to have real product and real operators in the space. And we're starting to see all that come together. And then nothing cooks better than a bear market, which just cleanses the palate, cleanses the supply, cleanses the demand. We've seen it happen in crypto. We've seen it happen in the internet. Obviously, 1.0 to 2.0 was not pretty for 4 or 5 years. And it's been a much smoother transition from 2.0 to potentially 3.0 on the internet. And I can think the same thing will happen in the marijuana industry. 2.0 to 3.0 will move a lot better than 1.0 to 2.0. So it seems like a lot of opportunity finally. Now, I mean, like people will go, oh, it's too late, but this could just be the beginning.
No. We've been pointing to the back half of 2020 for 2 years now is really when the fundamentals were going to scale. That's where the operating leverage kicked in for a handful of operators we've been following. So, the fact that you had the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think really catalyzed cannabis as an essential product, it became a vehicle for states to drive revenue. It became an asset that creates jobs. And this was all of this was almost serendipitous to these fundamentals scaling in the back half of 2020. So now you have social justice, you have the state need, you have need for jobs, and you have the fundamentals all scaling at the same time. It's a perfect storm for the space. And then you had the election where we went 5 for 5. So there's going to be more good news, I think, in the spring with new states. It's a good time to be in the space, I think.
Well, on that note, let's leave it on a high note, and we'll check back in hopefully, and let's just hope we don't have to check in until February and it's smooth sailing. Have a good end of the year. Thanks for taking so much time with the community and taking time on a Sunday.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you, Howard. You're always a gentleman.
All right, talk to you soon. See you, bud.